There are people who cannot help but notice. In conversations, they hear not only the words, but the hesitation between them. In a room, they sense not only the laughter, they notice the silences, the strained laughter, the tension behind the smiles. They don't set out to uncover hidden motives or buried grief. It simply reveals itself. A glance, a pause, a silence. Everything speaks. For them, life rarely feels light, because once the mask is seen through, it can never be unseen. Carl Jung believed this kind of awareness was not a blessing, but a dangerous gift, a rare condition of perception sharpened so far that ordinary social life becomes unbearable. This is the curse of perception, not madness, not delusion, but awareness sharpened so far that ordinary social life becomes hard. Jung once described a woman whose life had been quietly dismantled by this sensitivity. Outwardly, she was unremarkable, a modest, thoughtful woman, but she noticed. At her workplace, she could feel when colleagues disliked each other, even though they smiled in meetings. She sensed when someone's praise was hollow, when irritation lurked beneath courtesy. Among friends, she saw grief behind cheerful stories, bitterness beneath laughter. She didn't try to expose it, she didn't accuse anyone, but her presence became unsettling. People felt seen in ways they hadn't consented to, and slowly they drifted away from her. Friendships dissolved, jobs ended, not because she was wrong, but because she was too right. Jung realized she was not delusional. She was not imagining what wasn't there. She simply perceived what others refused to see, and that perception, instead of helping her, isolated her. Those who carry such vision often describe a life marked by misunderstanding. They are called paranoid, negative, too intense. But the truth is simpler. Honesty unsettles people. To point out what others prefer to ignore is to become the problem yourself, a mirror that others cannot bear to look into. So they learn silence. They walk away rather than argue. They absorb far more than they share. The loneliness is profound, surrounded by people, yet apart, living in what feels like a different reality. Jung called it not madness, but overconsciousness, a mind tuned so finely that it perceives what the collective depends on not perceiving. Jung observed that those who see too much carry invisible burdens, ones rarely spoken about, yet felt every day. The first burden is awareness itself. Once deception is noticed, it cannot be unseen. Life loses its softness. Where most people hear laughter, the perceptive hear tension. Where others see harmony, they feel conflict. Imagine a marriage celebrated by all, but in the perceptive eye, the quiet contempt is obvious. Imagine a dinner table where jokes are told, yet beneath the smiles lies exhaustion, sadness, anger. Most continue eating in peace. The perceptive one leaves heavy, unable to escape truths no one else admits. The second burden is rejection. The very act of noticing is enough to unsettle others. A simple remark, "Something feels off," can provoke hostility. Instead of appreciation, there is accusation, arrogance, pessimism, paranoia. Jung recognized this as projection. When people see their hidden flaws reflected back at them, they do not thank the mirror. They smash it, and the one who noticed becomes the scapegoat. The third burden is the dissolution of identity. When others' unconscious material flows constantly into one person, boundaries blur. This is where the modern idea of the empath appears. Many describe feeling like exposed nerves in a crowded world. They absorb tension, sadness, and anger until they no longer know which emotions are theirs. A day spent in public feels like carrying the weight of 10 lives. Jung called this participation mystique, emerging with the collective unconscious, so deep that the self risks disappearing. And there is a fourth burden, silence. Those who carry such perception quickly learn it cannot be shared freely, speak too much of what is noticed, and relationships fracture. Tell the truth too clearly, and doors close. Over time, silence becomes survival, outwardly calm, inwardly overwhelmed. This is why such perception, instead of being celebrated, often becomes a source of suffering. The world may romanticize intuition or sensitivity, but in practice, those who embody it stand on the margins. Jung himself was not immune to the dangers of seeing too much. In 1913, after his break with Freud, he entered what he later called his confrontation with the unconscious. He began experiencing visions that shook him deeply. Rivers of blood flooding across Europe, years before the First World War. Towering figures, ancient gods, archetypal images that spoke in symbols no one else could understand. At times he feared he was slipping into madness. The boundary between his inner world and the outer one blurred. By day he treated patients, respected and professional. By night he was overwhelmed by images and voices so intense he thought he might lose himself entirely. He later confessed, "I was menaced by a psychosis." Most men would have collapsed under such pressure. But Jung did something different. Instead of running, he turned toward the visions. He documented them obsessively, writing, sketching, painting. What looked like madness became his laboratory. The result was the Red Book, so private and raw it was only published decades after his death. Page after page, he recorded conversations with figures from his unconscious. He painted mythic battles, divine encounters, terrifying abysses. His family worried. His colleagues whispered. Outwardly, he was still the doctor. Inwardly, he was descending into a world few could survive. Yet, out of this ordeal came his greatest ideas. Archetypes, the collective unconscious, individuation. Jung realized that what threatened to destroy him was not psychosis, but consciousness stretching beyond its limits. What saved him was not resistance, but integration. By transforming chaos into meaning, visions into symbols, torment into theory, he survived. Jung's descent shows the razor-thin line between collapse and transformation. Without discipline, he might have vanished into silence like Nietzsche. With it, he became one of the greatest explorers of the human psyche. For Jung, survival was not about suppressing vision, but about learning to carry it differently. He called this path individuation, the slow, often painful process of becoming whole. It began with separation. Those who saw too much had to distinguish between what truly belonged to them and what was absorbed from others. Without this, they drowned in borrowed emotions. Empaths lived with this danger constantly. A crowded train, a tense workplace, even a family dinner could leave them overwhelmed, their own voice lost in the noise. The next step was shadow work. Jung saw that those who identified only with clarity were vulnerable to arrogance and despair. If they believed they were only light, then every encounter with darkness, both in themselves and others, became unbearable. By confronting their own shadow, they could meet darkness without collapsing. But individuation was not solitary. Even the strongest visionaries could not survive in isolation. They needed companions, not many, just a few, who could bear authenticity without retreating into defensiveness. Jung called them containers, rare souls who steadied the visionary simply by not rejecting them. Yet, the path was never secure. It was lined with traps. Some inflated, believing themselves prophets chosen to save the world, and became untouchable but unbearably alone. Others withdrew, deciding humanity was too blind to bother with. What looked like wisdom was often just exhaustion. Some fell into self-sacrifice, losing themselves in endless caretaking, and many relapsed, flooded once again during times of stress. This is why Jung insisted the path was narrow, fragile, easily lost. To live with heightened perception was to walk a razor's edge. One step led to transformation, the other to collapse. And yet, despite the danger, the path remained. Difficult, yes, but possible. The existence of even a few who managed balance was proof the burden, though heavy, could be borne. Even today, the pattern continues. Sensitive individuals and empaths move through a world often deaf to what they notice. In workplaces, they sense the competition behind teamwork, the resentments that poison meetings. They see exhaustion in a manager's face long before burnout is admitted. In families, they feel tensions ripple beneath the surface of holidays and dinners, arguments carefully avoided, disappointments hidden under ritual smiles. Most accept these illusions as normal, even comforting. But for the perceptive, illusions offer no refuge, and when they speak, the cost is immediate. They are dismissed as too emotional, accused of creating problems that weren't there. Some stay quiet, keeping insights private to avoid rejection. Others withdraw, choosing solitude over constant misunderstanding. Daily life becomes a balancing act, knowing too much while pretending to know less. Seeing through masks while learning to wear one just to survive. This is the quiet struggle of modern visionaries and empaths. Outwardly calm, inwardly heavy, present in the same world as everyone else, yet living in a reality few acknowledge. For Jung, this silence was not weakness. It was the same dilemma faced across history. The unbearable cost of seeing too clearly in a world that prefers its dreams intact. For Jung, the difference between collapse and transformation lay in one quality: humility. The gift of perception was never meant to crown someone above others. It was never proof of superiority. It was a responsibility, the fragile task of carrying truths too sharp for most to bear. Those who survived were the ones who held their insight gently, without arrogance. They spoke in ways that opened doors rather than slammed them shut. Their words invited reflection instead of forcing revelation. Humility did not mean denying the gift. It meant carrying it without weaponizing it, without demanding recognition. Jung's final lesson was that perception alone changes nothing. Only when tempered by humility does it become wisdom that can be shared. Without it, the gift devours its bearer. With it, the gift becomes a light others can endure. Jung came to believe that those who see too much, Visionaries, mystics, empaths are not errors of nature. They are pioneers of consciousness. They live the truths collective humanity will only later discover. But until that time, their burden is heavy. They live as exiles, misunderstood, rejected. Still, their vision is not meaningless. Their suffering is not empty. It is the cost of being ahead of one's time. The curse of perception is real, but so is its purpose.